Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name's Adrian. Last year, one of the games I was most looking forward to is this 13 Age 2nd edition. Sadly, it didn't actually come out in 2025, but it's out now, 2026. So I've actually got my copy of it. I've gone through it. I've had a look through and had a play with there's two core books we should explain. We've got the Player's Guide and a Games Master's Guide. So I've decided to, for the first time ever, I'm going to divide this review across two videos because it works out to be about 600 pages across both of the books. So today I'm just going to focus on the Player's Guide. Next week, around about the same time, the Dungeons Master's Guide review will come out. And at the end of the Dungeon Master's Guide, because it's a good 100 pages less, I'll have the full review of both books, if that makes sense. I'm still going to sort of cover a basic review of this book because you can buy them independently. You don't need them both. But let's just do the quick sal, so to speak. So one of the reasons I picked this up, it's a d20 system, so it's second edition. I never played first edition. So when I get to the section of the differences, means nothing to me. I'll kind of I'm just going to move past that. But yet, d20 fantasy system with its own sort of world. I've only ever heard really good things from it. People keep telling me I should try 13th Age, and I nearly picked it up a couple of years ago. Then you get wind of a second edition and you're going, okay, yes, this is truly compatible with first, so they say. I don't know. Again, I've got no experience of it. But the nutshell here is it's D20, there's no skill, so it's kind of OSR in that feel, but you also get that heroic aspect where the player characters right out of the gate feel super powerful. They've got a lot of hit points, and then this escalation dice, which is something I really, really like. So as the combat starts, the enemies feel a little bit harder than you, and then you kind of build through and you gain momentum, and it feels like they're getting a little bit weaker, you're getting more confidence. But I'll get all into that as I get into the review. But as I do with all of these, I'm just going to take you straight over to Drive-Thru-RPG because this is where you can pick up the PDF. So if you want physical copies, they are available from Pelgrane Press, direct, or probably any local friendly game store or internet, website, whatever you're going to use. But if you are going to pick up just the PDFs, I'll include my affiliate link in here. So if you want to pick it up, there is a bundle here, so you can pick up the Games Masters and the Heroes Handbook all at the same time. I was calling it the Players, but it's actually the Heroes Handbook. Or you can buy them individually down here on the right hand side. So the story of the crunch, so yeah, 592 pages across the two. So the Heroes Handbook, I think it's about 350. Games Master's Handbook about 250, hence the reason the larger review is going to go through right at the end. This is very much a storytelling game because the players they're going to have something unique about them that you're going to manage to adapt into certain situations. Again, we'll come on to that when we get to it. But you've got that background aspect. So, you could have been a gladiator previously. So anytime you want to roll to entertain or intimidate, you might be able to sort of use your background. All characters are going to have connections to icons. So icons in this game are very powerful. There's 12 powerful people. They're not sort of gods, they're sort of below gods, but they have a huge amount of influence in the world, and some people will be affiliated to them, and you can use them to help or hinder the game as you go forward. But it talks to you about crunch. So then immediately goes into streamlined combat rules to harness a good bit of crunchy tactical combat without feel ticky-tacky movement. So yeah, you don't need grids for this. This is very much theatre of the mind, the way it's going to work. So you've got the escalation dice, which is a really good mechanic. It brings in additional feats, additional powers, additional spells and things like that you can use. But more importantly, makes the players more powerful as the fight goes on. 9 classes. All of the familiar ones, so if you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, they're all going to make sense to you, but they're all going to come with very unique powers in the way that's done. And the second edition, it says it's based on 13 years of feedback and experience and play testers that sort of changed the game. So I can't speak on that, but what I can do is just get you straight into the rules, and we'll just get straight over to the front cover, which I don't like. I don't like the front cover. I like the art. I like the art style. So here you go, 13th Age, 2nd edition, Heroes Handbook, written by Rob Hensu, Jonathan Tweet, Lee Moyer, Aaron McConnell. And I don't know. I don't know what it is. I know art's very subjective. Some people will either love or hate this, but it's not a me thing. But it does kind of show, I think, the heroic aspect of the fantasy game. We're then going to get a map of the Dragon Empires. The two books, I should probably explain this the way they're going to work. So from the Hero's Handbook covers all of the character creation, hero aspect. And then once we get, if you want to find out more details about the Dragon Empire itself, you need to get into the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's kind of written because the chapters follow on as one whole book, but obviously it's divided into separate books, which is really good because, you know, if you've got players that want a copy to create characters, they can just buy the player's book. If you're going to have one Games Master, you could just buy the one Games Master. Obviously, I've punted for both because, and it's still in my collection. Despite my review, still in my collection, which means at some stage, I'll want to run this. Now, what we also get on the map here is the 12 icons and where they're based on here. I will get more into the map when we get on to the next book, okay? So here we go. Again, just a sort of replay of the writers of the book in here. So just here on the right-hand side. And then we get a little bit more information about the writers, the credits, play testers, things like that. Then I love this because this was crowdfunded. We then get the list of the crowdfunding people who play tested and the backers. A lot of writers, creators, they kind of throw this back at, like right at the back of the book. But I love the fact it's front and center. So if you did back this, you'll be in here somewhere. There's an open gaming license as well, which is really good. We're starting to see this more and more because, you know, you want third-party content. The more third-party content you've got, I think the more, you know, people love and appreciate the game. Contents. This is one of the things, I'm not really a fan of completely broken down contents because it does run over 3 pages here. It is easy to find out and find stuff, but it also has an index, which is curious because it's a really sort of pedantic content, which I think some people will love. I'm not necessarily a fan of this, but it does make it simple for me now to go through what's in here. So you're going to get an introduction to 13th Age. Example of play is chapter 1. And this is the best example of play I've ever read in a book. I could just read to you the first 15 pages and you're going to know exactly what's coming up in the book, how it works and everything else, which means, because that would be doing a disservice and I won't be able to go through all the pages and we'll be able to see the art and everything, I'm going to ignore the whole of the example of play. So we're just going to skip through it. But obviously, as a Games Master and a player, you definitely want to read the example of play. Chapter 2 will then give us character creation. So it's going to teach you character creation, rolling your ability scores, some basic stuff that everyone's going to get, like armor class, physical and mental defenses. You're then going to pick your kin, which is your ancestral race, because that would be human, dwarf, elves. We'll then get some more unusual ones like draconic, forgeborn, which effectively is a warforge, if you're aware of that. We've then got the 9 classes for chapter 4, so through from barbarian, bard, cleric, fighter, paladin, ranger, rogue, sorcerer, wizard. All very familiar if you've played Dungeons & Dragons or most other games. You should get a flavour for what that character is going to be doing. So each of them are very unique in the way they feel. And also, when we get to the classes, everything you need for the class is within the class. So when we look at the bard, for example, versus the barbarian, so the barbarian is across 8 pages from say 61 to 69. The bard is 23 pages from 70 to 93 because it includes, for each of the classes, it's going to include your sort of starting bonuses, your AC, your equipment, your special abilities, your feats, the basic abilities that you get for all of them. And then if you're a caster, all the spells are actually included in the one section, as well as the equipment. It's really, really, really well laid out and inspirational. I like the fact that if you want to find out about what a bard does, just go to the bard section, 23 pages. You're not like other books flicking backwards and forwards across, you know, going then to the spell tables and stuff. Really, really clever the way this is laid out. Then get a little bit of a section here on familiars and pets, because these three of the classes can have familiars and pets. We're then going to chapter 5, which is unique heroes. So this is what makes your character unique. So that you've got the one unique thing, your background, looking at skills, I'll show you how they work, different feats, gears, your relationship to the icons, and then chapter 6 will have it's the full flavour part of how the icons work and interact with the game, with some handy rules and examples. Should say that throughout the whole of this book, there is amazing examples on how to play. We're then going to get chapter 7, which is combat. Combat is about 23 pages. That's it. It's that concise, which is why when it talks about crunchy, the crunchy aspect is the feats and working the powers with the escalation dice, but the rule set is incredibly simple. Now, what's included in this book? Here we've got the Hero's Handbook. So we've already looked at the first 7 chapters, okay, which is going to take you down to the combat rules and then Appendix. The Games Master's Guide here is going to then do chapter 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So it kind of flows as one perfect book, but easily divided into 2 books for sales purposes, which is really, I've talked about this, it's really good. I don't want to sort of bang on about it again. We're then going to get the basic introduction to the 12 basic icons from Archmage, Crusader, Diabolist, Dwarf King, Elf Queen, the Emperor, the Great Gold Worm, which is the good dragon, the High Druid, the Lich King, the Priestess, the Prince of Shadows, and the 3, which is the 3 sort of more evil dragons. So each of these has got a level of influence, I should say a high level of influence in the world, and the players will have relationships with them that will either help or hinder the play. So all the examples are in here, and once you get into the Games Master's Guide, it gives you a little bit more hints and stuff as well. So the Archmage is, as you get, magical entity tend to be good. The Crusader is the armoured fist of the Dark Gods. Demon threaten to destroy the world that the Dark Gods want to rule, and so the Crusader draws upon their Dark Gods' power to destroy demon kind. Diabolist, as you'd imagine, a villainous icon. The Dwarf King is he's basically the Lord of the Forge. We've then got the Elf Queen, which is the queen of the high courts and the wood elves, dark elves, which effectively drow in here, and high elves. We've then got the Emperor, which rules the Dragon Empire, the Great Gold Worm, which is the good dragon. We then get the High Druid, which is the champion of the wild, the Lich King, King of the Undead, or healing the dead. And then we've got the Priestess, which is the Priestess of Light and speaks to those who please her. So she's part Oracle, part Mystic. We've then got the Prince of Shadows, which is part Thief, part Trickster, and an Agent of Change. And then finally, we've got the 3 lesser nice and friendly dragons. So the players will pick between 1 and 3 of these, and the Games Master will, and it'll all make sense when we get there on how they're going to influence not only the way the players play, but the campaign itself. Okay, so example of play, say this will just take you through everything. Combats, arcs, the basics of combats, the character sheet. This is another down for me. I'm not a massive fan of landscape character sheets. I don't know why. It's just to me. I like them portrait. I'd say sometimes I know I can be incredibly pedantic, but the character sheet is incredibly helpful and functional. It just faces the wrong way for me. But this will give you a nice breakdown of your sort of 15 points in here and relay how they got. So we've got things like usage down here, your powers, your ability scores, hit points, how many you're going to go down until you're dead, backgrounds, things like that. It's all in here. It's all functional. And it's really easy to use. However, I kind of want to turn it around the other way because, I like to complain about the minute little details when I'm looking at books. Let me know actually down in the comments below whether you agree with this. But we're just going to jump straight on to chapter 2. So chapter 2 is going to take us through character creation because that's what you're here. You want to see how you create the character. Okay, so it's very simple. You're going to create your stats. You're going to then pick your kin, which is, say, ancestry or race. We're then going to pick your class in there. One new thing, your background, pick a level 1 feat, your ordinary gear, your relationships with the icons, and then you can go and murder hobo things. Or be nice to things, depends on how you're going to play the game. But this does feel very heroic. The characters are very tough out of the gate. I'm surprised I enjoyed this. I'll talk about it once I get into the characters because it's the character builds that make this game amazing because of the things you can do. But it's also quick, looking at other games out there that are quite heroic in nature that slow down combat because of the unique things that this game does. So your ability scores, we've got 6. Strength, Constitution, Dexterity, Wisdom, Intelligence, Charisma. If you've played any Dungeons and Dragons, Shadow Dark, things like that, it should all make familiar sense to you. But I'll just summarize them really. So anytime you're going to make a skill check, so you're going to do anything, the Games Master will pick one of the abilities. So if it's going to be something that's going to require sort of something strength, lifting, pushing things, you'd use your strength ability. Constitution, so this is things like toughness, encumbrance, ability to maintain running for extended period of time. It's going to go on to Constitution. Dexterity, which is your agility, reflexes, shooting range weapons. Wisdom is institution, insight, perception, so noticing things. Intelligence, how smart you are, how quick your brain works. And finally, charisma, interacting with people, trying to manipulate people to do what you want them to do, or even, intimidating them. So those are your 6 statistics. So what we're going to then do is pick how we're going to get them. This game does something different. It doesn't want you to roll. It's going to give you some base abilities that you then pick and assign. In the appendix, it's got rules for it if you want to roll it. Personally, I'd have put it in here, but if you want, you're old school, you like to roll, then you can roll. So what you'll do is you'll pick some scores. So if you go with the default array, you would pick a 17, a 15, 14, 13, 12, and 10. And you'll just assign those where you want. And then 2 of the skills, your stats, you're going to pick, abilities, to use the correct phrase in this one, you're going to add +2 to them. That's it. You can be good at everything, so you can have average scores if you want to. But eventually then, you're going to do your ability modifiers, which obviously showed on the character sheet as well. Example here, if you've got an 18 in strength, you'd put +4 next to it. If you've got an 11, you'd put a 0 next to it. And that's what you're going to add to your d20 when you're rolling. Hit points, you're going to get a high level of hit points in this game. And the hit points are determined by your starting class, and then you'll be modified by your con modifier, and then you get to multiply them by a certain amount of things. Also, as characters level up, they become a lot more powerful as time goes on. You're then going to get an armor class. This is how difficult it is to physically hit you. You get physical defense, which is, it's a bit like a reflex saving throw in this, but this is going to be made up from the average. Well, it's not quite the average. You're going to get a starting point from your class, and then you're going to take your strength, con, and dex. In the middle of one of those, you're going to use the bonus to add to it. But this is going to help you not be hit against things like energy damage and fireballs and poison. Hence the reason it feels a little bit sort of reflex save. And then we got mental defense, which is against illusion, psychic attacks. Initiative, keep that simple. Dexterity modifier, +1 for every level that you're going to get, and then you're going to roll a d20. Recovery dice and recoveries. So this is going to be, at the end of a combat, you can have a certain amount of recoveries during a arc. I'll come on to arc as we go forward, because an arc is just a set amount of, so it's normally every 3 or 4 combat when certain things reset. But if you want to recover your hit points, you will use a certain amount of recoveries. Most classes seem to have 8. There's a few that get 9, and then it just tells you the die that you're going to roll for it. So we're just next on to kin, okay? And kin, say, is race, ancestry. Now, each of the kin, I think all of them have got 3. So we'll just use the human for an example. So here we've got a human, bulk stand. Actually, all of the kin, when we look at them, their ability scores don't change. So whether you're a halfling, whether you're a human, whether you're the sort of demon creature, they're all going to have the same ability scores. The only difference is you're going to get to pick one of the kin abilities from here. Some of them will have feats as well. Okay, so for example, if you're going to pick a human, you get to pick one of the kin powers. Okay, so you can either push it. So once per battle, when the escalation dice is +2, you hit but don't crit the target with an attack. You can attempt to push it as a free action. You can do a quick fight. So at the start of each battle, roll initiative twice and choose the highest one, or you can be resourceful and get more feats. Now, pick one of them, only one of those. I haven't seen anything that's going to ever allow you to pick more than one. There may be a feat that you can pick up as time goes on, but I didn't notice it. So dwarfs are going to do things like, defense, never get in. We've got 3 different types of elves in here. So we've got the high elf, silver elf, which confused me because I was expecting the silver elf to be the high elf. They're actually like the drow in here. And then we've got the wood elves, which, they're elven grace. They're the more graceful ones, better with a bow, keen eye. Gnomes are your traditional gnomes. They're good at talking to animals. That's their feat, isn't it? Yeah, so this is a good example here. So some of the kin get a feat. So you can pick feats as you go on. So these are game-changing abilities. Feat should make sense. Features, whatever it may be. So some of the kin will actually have a feat that you can pick as well, okay? But then you do get, obviously, in here, you still get your kin powers, okay? And we've got half-elves in here, halflings, and then the last of the standard ones we get is the troll kin here, okay? Now, they are sort of big and more powerful, so they're going to get, like, free fighting, killer instinct, or they can become lethal. So once per battle, when the escalation dice is +1, so that's starting the second round. We'll explain escalation dice because I love the escalation dice. May have mentioned that I really like that more than once. You can re-roll any roll that isn't a natural one. Okay, so we then get the more unusual kin. So we get the draconics, which are, so they get things like a dragon. They're going to get breath weapon, energized attacks, rise above. Remember, you're only picking one. The forgeborn, very much, you know, these are constructed ages ago by dwarfs, and so they're going to get, say, they very much feel like the Warforge without copyright licensing, probably. Tieflin, so these have been touched by hellish powers. We then get on the flip side, we get the holy ones, which are touched by the bright gods. So that's it. That is your 13 kin. Say, I'm just quite happy to sort of allow players to pick from whichever ones they want to go through, because, you know, I want the players to enjoy the game they want to enjoy within the world that I'm going to play. But if it's in the book, I'm going to include it. But it's really up to you as a games master if you want to take it out. So let's now look at Chapter 4, the classes. This is really handy, actually, when I was looking at this, because when we get into the classes, as you could see, with the barbarian being, I think, what was it, 9 pages, and the bard being, I think, 23 or 24 pages, whatever it was. Some of them are clearly more complex than others. Now, this has got I'm going to choose my words carefully, but when I was playing through the characters and sort of leveling them up and having play with their abilities, this very much feels like a sort of living card game-esque. So if you've ever bought any of those card games where, you know, you buy a pack, like Flesh and Blood, for example, you get a hero in that game, and then you can move things out. So as they go up, you can add and remove cards in. This very much feels like that, and some of the classes are significantly tougher and harder to play than others. And this basically breaks down. It basically says, you know, if you're a new player, go with the Paladin, because the Paladin's quite streamlined. It's nice and simple. Then go to the Barbarian, then Fighter, then Rangers, because as you'd expect, martial classes in general are easier. Then the Rogue. Interestingly, it goes Sorcerer before Wizard, but as you can imagine, the toughest to play in here is the Bard. Because not only is the Bard the charismatic sort of face of the party, it's also got a ton of spells and sort of secret things that it can do. So it then talks about other classes from different books because it's backward compatible. So I am judging this purely on the core 2 rule books that we've got in here. So just before we get into the classes, it's going to explain to us how powers and spells work, or attacks. Now, there are a variety of different parts to each of them. And again, amazing examples over here. Not all of them will have all of the letters, okay, but it will give you a name, the flavour, so an idea of, so we'll just use the example here. Fork lightning. So the flavour is lightning would rather be cut loose than controlled. It then will give you the keyword, so it's a range spell, one arc, chain spell. We'll come on to that in a second, don't worry. How many people can be targeted, the attack line, how to hit, like roll for attack. Some abilities, if you miss, you will still do damage as well. Again, got that heroic aspect. Remember though, the creatures, if they miss, a lot of the time they will still do damage as well. The effect that it does, level by level improvements, and then feats. Because as characters go up in levels, a lot of the powers, a lot of the feats, and a lot of the spells become more powerful. So you don't need to learn something new. You're just going to get more power. So for example, Fork Lightning, as you can see, as you go up in levels, the amount of damage you're going to get is going to increase. One thing that the game does that it talks about, just to speed up from a convention point of view, is it talks about average damage. Never do average damage. Always let the players roll. I'm a huge fan of rolling dice, hearing that clatter, and players get excited or a little bit sad when, you know, because you're going to have bad rolls every now and again, but it is a little bit more interesting rolling. But for speed, you can do it, and there's a table actually at the back in the appendix, which will just give you the average sort of die roll from each of the die that are in here. Different ranges, we've got 3 different ranges in general. So we've got combat, ranged, and then close quarter. Common patterns. So when you are going to cast a spell or ability, you can either do it at will, so you can do it every single turn. Recharge, if you played any, I think from about 4th edition onwards for D&D, so you get to the end of the combat, if something's got a recharge of 11 plus, you roll a d20. If you get 11 or higher, you keep that ability, you can take it into the next battle. If you roll lower than that, you can't. You might have something that's once per battle, twice per battle, once per arc, second per arc. Now I'm going to do arcs. To keep the game, I think, really interesting, this does something that, let's do it in the slight negative. One of the disadvantages I find with other games, I'm going to choose my words carefully because I like to sit on this fence, is that other games, the players will try to avoid combats once they're waiting to, you know, they may have lost a few abilities or powers because they know once they go to sleep at night, they can wake back up and get a lot of their abilities back, if not all of them. What the arc system does with this is it basically means you reset the arc every certain amount of combats. Default is 4, you can move it to 3. So it does mean certain games, if you go to sleep, you're going to get your abilities back when you wake up in the morning. And therefore you might slow down, decide not to do anything for the rest of the day. With arcs, brilliantly, it means that the players have to have a certain amount of combats before they get that. Now, those combats can be over a day, a week, or month. You know, they can go, right, I'm going to take some time out because I want to recover. You can try and recover. You can take some rest. You might get some additional hit points back, but you're not getting your certain powers back until you complete that next arc, which will may mean 1 or even 2 additional battles. It's going to make players really think about it. When it comes to choosing spells and casting spells, you choose them at the start of the arc, and that's them. They are set as time goes on. Okay, there are a variety of different damage types in here, from acid, cold, fire, force, and obviously because of that, some creatures will have immunity. There are weapon fighting stuff. Once we get to, it's right at the back in the combat section. Actually, it's kind of a combat section and a keyword section. This will take you through all the conditions and stuff at the back. As players go up in levels, they will do additional damage. Not only will the dice change, as you can see here, so this is just the example of the weapon progression, but their ability modifier will be multiplied, and then once you get to level 8, it's multiplied plus a static plus 5. Level 9 multiplied by times 4 again, plus a static plus 10. Once you get to level 10, you're going to do your weapon dice plus your modifier times 4 plus 15. So the damage, it's like spell damage, feat damage, all of this is going to get more and more damage as the players just fly into that massive heroic aspect. So starting stats. So here we've got the starting stats for a first level character, broken down from barbarian to wizard. Now we're just going to pick on the barbarian, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the other classes, because again, I could just make this video hours and hours long. So here we go. Basic hit points for the barbarian is 7, which is one of the highest ones. So only the fighter and paladin gets more. The usual start with an AC of 12, but different ones. So the paladin will get 16. Again, this is probably why it's simpler to play as well. So you've got a base physical defense, which is 11, base mental 10, recovery is the 8, remember, but every time they roll a recovery dice, they're going to get D12 though on the barbarian. So that's I think that's the highest, isn't it? There's no one else with a D12 yet. So let's just get into the barbarian and have a look. And here's the changes. I mentioned this right at the start. So these are the changes from first edition to second edition. If you want to find them, they are on page 60. I'm not going to talk about them any more than that. So here we got the barbarian. So it's going to give you an overview of playstyle. You know, the barbarian character can be straightforward and easy to play. It's a good class for new players. Talk about that. The ability modifiers, you're going to want strength, and then beyond that, you're going to want constitution. Talk about different backgrounds, which we'll talk about. And it talks about the feel as well, and the icons, which icon you should pick. So it talks about the high druid, it makes sense. All the 3, especially the red dragon, or even the diabolus, if you want to be a little bit leaning down the sort of more evil side, heroic evil. Still, you can be wherever you want, because the icons will say they are a little bit, actually. Now I think about it, they kind of work a little bit like alignment from other games, because they will give you, especially if you're going to be positive into the icon, it's going to give you a leaning for your character to go down a certain route. Now, all the characters, there's no gear section in this book. There's no gear section in the Games Master's book either. It talks about the gear in here. There's treasure tables and stuff in the Games Master's Guide, but there's no actual, equipment section anywhere in the book. So starting characters are going to get some equipment here, and you're going to be sort of given it, and you're going to get, it tells you what you can pick from and which armor you're going to get. We then get to look at the level progression and what feats and talents you're going to get. Now, feats and talents are broken down into different levels, I say, and they also level up as you go on. Once you are at fifth level or less, you're going to pick adventurer level feats. Don't worry, it sounds complicated, it sounds a lot to remember. It's not, because we've got these amazingly handy tables here. Once you get to fifth level, you can have a fourth level adventure and 1 level champion. Once you then get to eighth level, you can pick up epic as well as champion adventures. Obviously, if you want, if you're eighth level and you want an adventure level feat or class talent, you can. Not sure why you would, but you can do that because, as a general rule, the epic ones tend to be better than champion. Champion tends to be better than adventurer. It's then going to take you through a reminder of your key scores and your abilities for your character. Then it's going to go, here you go, here's some basic attacks that you're going to get. So basic melee attacks, strike and attacks, range attacks, throw and attack. And then we've got barbarian class features. All barbarians share 3 class features. They're going to get grim determination, legendary prowess, and rage. Okay, so that is all going to come as your standard package. Everything beyond that point is what you're going to get, okay? Then going forward, we've got some barbarian feats. So these are specific feats. And if I can find, here we go. So let's just pick barbaric cleave then. Once per battle, remember, battles, not arcs. Make a barbaric cleave melee attack as a free action, and one of your melee attacks drops a non-mook enemy or 3 mooks. Okay, mooks are a different type of enemy, which, again, something to remember. This is where that crunchy aspect of the game comes in, because there's a lot of sort of keywords to remember. Okay, if you're not engaged with any other enemy, when you trigger the barbaric cleave, you can move as a free action to go and attack something else. But if you get this as the adventurer level, so once per arc, when your barbaric cleave misses, use a free action to turn the miss into a hit. As you get to level 5, you can do the champion feat. Once you get to level 8, you can take it into the epic feat. So these will automatically happen. You don't get both, so as you level up, they will level up with you, or you can buy them as an epic feat. So some of them will just be epic feat as we go through. So for example here, champion tier talents now. So as we go up, you can buy it as a champion and epic. And then once we get to the epic tier here, so we've got things like bloody resolve. Remember, you've got to be level 8 or more to get to the epic talents. So by contrast, let's look at the bard, which is going to come with spells, bardic talents, bardic songs, and how many people you can control through your songs, which is based over the amount of hit points. Again, you're going to get your gear, and then we're going to get into special feats, progression, instrument talents, different weapons different instruments they're going to get. So whether you're going to do it through dance or through drums or through pipes, as you can see why it's, the bard is so vast. Whether you want to go down the singing or string as well. And then we get all the talents from the basic ones all the way up through to the epic, and then you get all the spells in here. And we're going to see the same thing through to the clerics. This is actually where I think it really starts to shine as a game. Say, it just feels very much like a sort of living card game where you're going to be able to pick and choose the cards or feats, in my mind, that are going to slot into the tools that the players are going to take. It just feels so epic in nature, and the amount of damage you can pull off. Because I'd say one thing a lot of the feats do is they will move up with the escalation dice, and you get it with certain spells as well. So it might say that, if you cast a spell when the escalation dice is 2, you do X ability. If you can wait till 4, it will do more damage. Now that's really clever, because as a player, you need to sit down and go, do you do this? I'm just going to pretend lightning bolt for argument's sake. Do you do the lightning bolt very early on and do a little bit of damage, or do you leave it a little bit longer and then basically pull off that ability and do a huge amount of damage? But the thing is, you might be dead between then, or one of the players, another one of your players may have gone down. I'd say it's such a... When I found out this was sort of heroic fantasy, I was like, I'm not sure I really want to be playing a heroic fantasy game. But this just does it in such a way that it's really interesting, because it's power without bloat, if that makes sense. As much as it comes in as crunchy, everything has a specific purpose. But because everything levels up, with the characters, it's a lot better in the way that it does stuff, if that makes sense. And because you've got all the feats and everything to pick from, you could, You probably shouldn't, because they're not going to want this. But let's just pick at acid arrow here. As you can see, it's just jumping up from the amount of damage that it's going to do as you go up in levels. Because once we get to the monster, like when we're going to go through the bestiary and stuff next week, you're going to see just how epic some of these creatures actually are. But it's so nice that it's just easy and put in here on, how you can just. One I said from outset. Well, one thing that does annoy me with other books is that as a player, if I want to play a wizard, I'm in and out of different parts of the books, looking through realms of spells and feats and everything else that I can do. Yes, there is a little section coming up that we're going to see on feats, which is just some shared feats that just kind of feels included. I don't know where it would have gone. I don't think it could really go anywhere else. So it's got to go somewhere. But it's the layout is absolutely magnificent for this book. Shared talent here. So here's another talent. So familiar or pet. So if you're a ranger, sorcerer, or wizard, you then get to, if you want to, you can have this talent here, which means from the ranger's point of view, you're going to get a pet. From the sorcerer's point of view and the wizard's point of view, you're going to have a familiar, and how the familiar and the pets all level up with you. And that is more than halfway through the book. So we're we're 200 pages on a 350-page book, because so much of the book is the amazing character classes and what the players can actually pick. So let's get into the unique heroes now. So one unique thing. So this is something that can't be combat based and can't be combat powered. Okay, so it's got some examples in here. So I'm the eldest elf in the world. I'm the bastard child of the emperor. So it's going to give you a bit of background, a little bit of flavour, some sort of motivation, might hint at powers, some campaign pivots for the games master to think about. Or it might even be something unique that you can grow with. So, for example, it might be I see dead people, which, why? And then it allows the games master to actually work from. I'm the only human to be called into the dwarven priesthood ever. So something that's non-mechanical, but is going to make the player unique, obviously, and very interesting. Now, it's going to give you some then more examples of in here to how to sort of create the story around it and how to sort of involve the players. The next thing we need to look at is backgrounds. Now, the characters are all going to get 8 background points, and you can distribute them however you want to a maximum of 5. It's going to give you, I think the easiest way to do is just give you some examples of backgrounds here. So you may be a con woman, a military chef, a streetwise thief, something along those lines. So 8 points up to a maximum of 5. And what this basically means, let's pick your streetwise thief. So let's say you're going to make a stealth check and you have 4 points in your streetwise thieves. That means the games master is going to go, right, we're going to pick dexterity for the skill check. So you're going to get your d20, add your bonuses that you're going to get. And then we're going to roll a stealth roll, technically, or still dexterity roll. And then as the player's going to go, I used to be a streetwise thief. Can I use, and I used to sneak around, can I use my skill, my background? The game's like, go, yeah. And how many background points you got in it? 4. So it's simple. You just add +4 to the roll. So if you had a background of 2, you're going to add +2 to the roll. Actually, that simple to get backgrounds done. Really, really, really easy. Little bit of thing on natural 20s and 1s. So as you imagine, a 20 is always going to be a success. It's technically, a crit. It's going to do double damage in combat, but it's always going to be a success with something more. A 1 is always going to be a failure. And then it's going to talk about failing in style. So succeeding backwards. Be like Kirk. So sometimes in Star Trek, Captain Kirk is forced to walk somewhere under the armed guard. He walks there as if he intended to do so anyway. So, just sort of pull it off that something slightly more negative is going to come out, so you still sort of succeed, or you make it out not to be your fault. Section here on feats, which so you've already seen most of the class feats as well as some of the kin had feats, but it's just a reminder of how many feats you can have at which level. And here we are, here's the universal feats. For example, one of them here, improved initiative. You can take this feat only once. It improves as you rise in level. So whether you go from adventurer, you're going to get +4 to initiative. 5th level, it's going to go +5, and at 8th level, it's going to go to +6. So you've got different feats. There's only about 2 pages of them, the shared feats. We then get the gear table. I said that there isn't really a gear table in here, which is just going to talk a little bit about one-armed, two-armed weapons, some armor categories, and some range weapons. But yeah, there isn't a list. You know, if you want to go and buy a sleeping bag or a tent, it's not in here. Right, iconic relationships. Well, icon relationships. So the players are going to have a certain amount of points, which is 3, and they're going to pick the type of icon they're going to follow. Now, this is where it feels a little bit strange. So the players need to decide whether they want to pick a heroic icon, ambiguous, or villainous. Now, it depends on out of the 12 icons they want to pick. Now, you can mostly put your 3. So for example here, so if you want to go into a positive relationship with a heroic, you can pay up to 3. But if you want a negative, why would you want a negative relationship with one of the heroic icons? Well, you know, just to be a bit of a pain. Story-wise, there could have been something that came up in your background that means that, you know, the Emperor doesn't like you for some reason. And again, it just allows it to be narrative, and the Games Master can then pull on it, because each relationship that you've got with the icon, well, the more points you've got, the more dice you're going to roll, which will have a better chance of having something positive that the player can actually do as time goes on. And then we're going to just get into leveling up. So every time you level up, you're going to get bonuses to attack, defense, skill checks. You're going to get additional die with the weapons. You're going to get a lot more hit points. It says around about 25% more hit points, additional recovery dice, additional feats. And then certain things, so timing and feats and powers, don't necessarily go up every level, but you'll have seen that as you pick your class. There's no multi-classing in here. If you're a bard until you either die or get to 10th level. Chapter 6 is going to go through the icons and the iconic connections. Now, each of the icons is going to be, well, we'll just pick on the Archmage, for example. So the Archmage rules the Dragon Empire, but it's not the Archmage who holds it together. So this is this is the head of the Mages Guild, and people revere them, because you don't know whether it's a he or she at this moment in time, because they're in the world, but the players are really never going to meet them, especially at the lowest levels. But it'll talk about the ages and the archmages, the allies, so which are the icons they're friendly with, their enemies and their rivals in here, which ones they will automatically dislike. Talk about the different types of arcane backgrounds that you're going to have with it, and then, you know, the sort of things the player's going to be doing for working alongside the Archmage. This is quite interesting. I thought the organisations were quite good, because this is going to allow the Games Master and the players to either maybe work for some of the organisations, or you're going to be able to use the organisations in the world. So, for example, the Archmage organisations reach far across the Empire, beyond further than any other icon. So we've got the School of Imperial Wizardry, the Archmage's largest and most visible organisation. Apprenticeships spend their time in the field working for the Archmage and learning as they go. So you're going to interact with these people and possibly see them, or these factions, as you go on. And then it'll just take you through, say, we've got the other 11 icons in here. I was kind of really struggling to really understand how the icons work and how you're going to use your 3 points. But like everything else in 13th Age, it gives you really good examples. So we're just going to get through. Obviously, we've got the Priestess here, Prince of Shadows, which is really cool if you want to be that sort of, you know, more darker and sort of sinister, sort of thief sort of characters. But here we go. So depending on how many dice you're going to get, will determine your chances of getting a sort of the influence in the campaign. So you may have a narrative or a combat connection. Okay, narrative connections are things that are going to change the game for the better or worse, depending on what you want to do. Or combat is going to change the game in the middle of a combat, and it should be quite obvious. So what the players and the Games Master are going to do is they'll decide with each arc or campaign, depending on the length that you're going to do, which icon you're going to use. So, for example, we'll pick the Elf Queen here. So if any players have got the Elf Queen, for each one of their, in the start of the arc, they will roll a d6 for each of their relationship points they got with the Elf Queen. If they roll a 5 or 6, they're going to have a heroic relationship at some stage during the arc. So they'll just write that down. And if it comes to the end of the arc and they haven't used that benefit, it'll be gone. When the players want to do something, for argument's sake, let's say they're being interrogated by a prince and they want someone to come in the room and tell the prince that he needs to urgently go out and listen to a message from someone else. They can put on the icon to do that, okay? So this isn't the icon actually turning up. This is something that's influenced by the icon coming around. So there's lots of examples in this section that's going to help the player out. So they will then go. You're then going to roll a d20 as a player. And if you roll 5 or less, there's going to be something so it's still going to work out, but there's going to be a more negative impact that's going to come out of that as well. When you go into combat, it's 50-50. So it's a 1 to 10 basically means that you're going to pull off your positive. You may have someone stumble or hurt their knee, or an extra force comes up that's going to help you out. There may be another army that's going to appear over the hill. They won't actually engage in the combat, but it might drive the enemy away because they see it. And the rest of this section is giving you examples from things like aids, and you can use flashback, like in the Blades in the Dark type aspect, so you can have something set up. Then gives you the examples and using connections during combat. Now, combat is going to be... it's not actually that long. There isn't actually a lot of things you can do in combat, other than obviously the fact that your feats and powers are going to have an impact on it. But it's going to take you through the combat sequence, the actions you're going to get, which is very sort of streamlined, how many attacks you get, damage dealing, talk about mooks, death and dying, reset and recharge, combat modifiers, special abilities and attacks, then honourable combat option, which is quite cool actually, because that is a way to... we'll talk about it anyway when I get there. The initiative is, most people would have seen this. All the players will roll individual initiative, but it tells you to group the group the NPCs by creature type. So if you've got a boss and goblins and orcs, as a games master, you roll 3 different initiatives. 1 for the boss, 1 for the goblins, 1 for the orc. We'll keep this simple for action, so you can do a standard action. It's things like attack, cast a spell, stuff like that. Do a move action, which is moving. Obviously, you can do other stuff with your move action off feats and stuff, but we'll worry about the crunch when you've picked your feat. And then you've got a quick action, which is obviously going to be things like reactions and stuff. Now, the escalation die is what makes combat in this quick, more powerful, but tactical in nature, because the players are really going to have to think about when they're going to be using their powers. The games master doesn't get to take advantage of escalation dice. It's purely for the players, which represents to me their confidence, their ability to fight better, but also they're getting more opportunities and openings because the creatures are becoming tired. So, from a stamina point of view, they're they can't quite hit as hard as the combat goes on. So they're opening up opportunities. That's what you do. At the first round of the combat, nothing happens. Second round of the combat, you're going to get a d6 and you're going to put a 1 on it. Okay? And every round of combat from there on, you're going to keep turning that die up until you get to 6. Once it's at 6, it's at maximum. What the player's going to do, they're going to add that +1 to each attack roll they're going to make. So it's going to affect the spell attacks and physical attacks, and so melee and range attacks, so they're more likely to hit. Hence, example, as I was saying, for the creatures becoming tired and having the opening, so the players are just becoming better and better at fighting as time goes on. Really, really good mechanic, because it takes into account feats, takes into account powers, abilities and spells that the players, certain things are going to trigger at certain points. Most characters, once we get into combat, will be unengaged, but once you do become engaged, that's basically where something's attacking and stood next to you. Now, if you want to get away from there, you're going to need to use your move action so they don't get attack of opportunity. All of this should sound familiar to you. So, if you want to disengage, you're going to have to actually say give up your move action to sort of take a step back, or you can just run, which means the NPCs or whoever you're fighting or whoever you're engaged with, is how I should word it, can then have an opportunity attack. So they're going to be able to attack you. You can intercept, so you can move to intercept other people's movements and things like that. We've got a variety of special cases, so things like burrowing, pushing, speed, chases. So all the rules are in here as well. We're then going to get into rallying. So once per battle, every PC as a standard action can rally to spend some of their recoveries to get some additional hit points. You can fight in spirit form. There is an assist ability, so you can assist someone in combat to give them a static +2. Retreat, party action, so you can all go, we are getting the bejeebers kicked out of us, let's all leave together. All the sort of narrative losses and stuff are in there for leaving. It talks about how to attack. Obviously, you're going to make an attack roll. You're looking to equal or exceed someone's AC to hit them. Crunch, as it says, so you're going to, there are a variety of added bonuses. Don't forget the escalation dice as time goes on. But in general, once you hit, you're going to basically roll your damage and just take that damage straight off any creature's hit points. So if you roll a natural 20, you're going to do double damage. Nice and cool. Rolling 1 is a fumble. If a creature has a damage on a miss, you're still going to apply the different damage on there. So it might be a spell that's got it, or the monsters are going to have it as well. As a general rule, most bonuses stack. There are some that, especially when it comes to feats, they don't tend to stack over and above on the feats, but most bonuses to hit are going to do additional damage. This does have negative hit points in here, which is a very old school feel to it. But when you're at 0 hit points, you're going to go down. As you go into negative hit points, once you're at negative hit points equal to half your maximum, you are dead. But the good thing is, once you then come back, once you start healing, you don't heal up the negative hit points. Okay, so if someone, let's say you've got 4 hit points left and you're hit for 10 damage, you're going to go -6. But once that heal comes in, if it's magical healing or you roll your recovery dice, you might actually ping back up and actually start at 1 hit point. You haven't got to take that -6 off. Staggered, such a good ability. Or if you played 4th edition, Blooded, I use it in all of my games. It allows players to understand the creatures at half hit points. But what this does, there's a lot of creatures, there's some certain feats and spells and stuff that once a creature is staggered, half hit points, you can do additional damage or additional abilities. Really, really good in here. At the end of the combat, obviously, you can roll your recovery, which is, we talked about how many recovery dice you're going to get, which is going to add to your hit points and stuff. Mooks. Dealing damage to monsters and mooks work slightly differently. So mooks have a collective amount of hit points. So each mook, let's say it's worth 3 hit points, and you do 10 damage into there, you're going to kill 3 mooks, because 3 lots of 3 is going to kill 1, and then that extra hit point's just going to go into the crowd. So there's some additional rules. So it's just going to allow you to do that mass brawl of just wade in, because when mooks attack, each individual mook is going to do an attack and potentially damage to you. Talked about full heal ups. Full heal ups are only going to come at the end of the arc, and it says here roughly 3 or 4 battles. Okay, so you can quick rest the end of combat, but that's going to be using your recharge dice. Okay, shooting into melee is slightly harder, as you'd expect. It's got that old aspect. You don't want to be missing shooting into melee. We've got the rules here for invisibility, and then we get into the conditions, so things like charmed, confused, helpless. So the good thing is that this is mostly alphabetized, so it's going to take you through to coup de grace, grabbing, ongoing damage, saves where it's not because random directions comes in here, teleportation, temporary hit points, 2 weapon fighting, then honorable combat. So if you've got to, you're arguing as a group on, or another group wants to go and attack the dragon first, you do this honorable combat. So it's just a fight down to, I think it's 33% of hit points, and then the combat ends, so it's not really to the death. As we get into Appendix A, which is the character options, this is going to talk about points buy for ability scores or randomly rolling, if that's the way you want to do it. We've got the dice approximations, which are saying about the different die, and if you want to use the average. A 1-page appendix here for the icons. This is probably worth printing off, giving to the players to think about it. And then we've got a glossary and index here as well. Character sheet on the back, well, a double-page character sheet on the back, and then the back of the book. And that's it. That is my look at the Hero's Handbook for 13 Days 2nd edition. I think you can tell I do like it. I was honestly very surprised, because, say, heroic fantasy, I've kind of tired of it, because I've played it for quite a long period of time off a different rule set, and I found combat slow, tedious, and boring. This is none of that. This is fast, interesting, and strategic, because that escalation dice really changes the way combat works, because you're going to get more powerful as time goes on. You're going to hit more often. You start off a little bit, got to be a little bit defensive right at the start of the combat, because the creatures are a lot more powerful than you. But as time goes on, as you start surviving the first 3 rounds and finding out what their weaknesses are, what advantages you can use against them, and then start unloading your feats and your spells as that escalation dice gets to where it wants to be, really interesting. Say 13 different kins. The feats really sort of change the kin. I keep wanting to say ancestry or race. It really does change the way the kins work, and it does make them absolutely unique. Now, I think certain players might get annoyed the fact that, this is what you could have got, this is what you could have got, you can only pick this one, because some of those feats you're gonna want, the kin powers, you're actually gonna want all 3. So that hopefully I've missed a feat in here that will allow you to go back and pick more. I don't know, because I didn't notice it. But once we get into the character classes, this is, People might think it's a strange analogy, but it does feel deck building 101 for me. You know, here is your specific class that is incredibly good at what it does. It's very unique. It's got its own role in the party, but it's incredibly diverse as well, because there's so many options that you're going to get within there to sort of pick and choose what you want. There are some utility feats in there, not a huge amount of them, but they are very good in aspect. The icons, I say it's the bit that's, and I think it might be me kind of struggling, because I think I'm going to need to actually sit down and run an adventure with the icons to fully embrace how they work. I think maybe I've got a little bit of a block in there on that. So I'd like to have seen some equipment. That I think that would have been helpful. You know, I want to buy I want a tent or some rope and stuff, because there's not a lot of that in there. But I'm going to leave it there for now. I think going into the Games Master's Guide, I'm a fan of 13th Age 2nd edition, but it's going to make more sense once I've done the Games Master's Guide. So I'll be back same time next week, going through the Games Master's Guide, which in essence is the next few chapters in the same book. So if you've enjoyed this, you know what to do: like, share, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next week. Well, I'll see you before then with some other video. Thanks for watching.